Wolves spark intense emotions. They were revered as symbols of the wilderness, worshipped as spirits of nature, idolized as the ultimate social animals. Yet fear and hatred of wolves, or at least of the ideals they symbolize, still runs deep. Today, these animals are subject to governmental protection, reintroduction, and removal processes. The state of Idaho has had an especially difficult time deciding what to do with these animals. In this video expose, I will detail the history of wolves in Idaho and why they have become the forefront of conservation in the state. Canis lupus, or more widely known as the gray wolf, is a canine native to the wilderness and remote areas of both Asia and North America. This type of wolf is native to the state of Idaho and general Rocky Mountain region. Historically, wolves have conflicted with nearly every human culture they have come into contact with. Predation on livestock has been one of the primary reasons for hunting wolves, and can pose a severe problem for wolf conservation. Causing economic losses, the threat of wolf predation causes great stress on livestock producers, and no foolproof solution of preventing such attacks short of exterminating wolves has been found. Domesticated and wild dogs also come into conflict with wolves, and can have negative effects for both species. Wolves often kill dogs, and wolf interbreeding with dogs can change local wolf pack demographics and behaviors. Disease can be spread from one species to another, causing deaths for both species. Wolves have a long history with humans. While they have been despised and hunted in most pastoral communities because of their attacks on livestock, they are also respected in some agrarian and hunter-gatherer societies. When Europeans first arrived in the northwest portion of the United States, wolf populations had decreased dramatically through hunting, trapping, and poisoning. Many years later, in 1974, after they were nearly wiped out in the lower 48 states, wolves in Idaho were declared endangered under the Endangered Species Act. From 1974 on, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Services have been trying to reintroduce gray wolves to Idaho to help bolster populations. The history of wolves in Idaho is simplified to an issue of state versus federal government, or at least that's what farmers, hunters, and other citizens in the state view it as. Local industry and environmental groups battled for decades over the Yellowstone and Idaho wolf reintroduction effort. The idea of wolf reintroduction was first brought to Congress in 1966 by biologists who were concerned with the critically high elk populations in Yellowstone and the ecological damages to the land from excessively large herds. Officially, in 1926 was the year that the last wolves were killed within Yellowstone's boundaries. When wolves were eradicated and hunting eliminated, the elk populations boomed. Over the succeeding decades, elk populations grew so large that they unbalanced the local ecosystem. The number of elk and other large prey animals increased to the point where they gathered in large herds along valley bottoms and meadows, overgrazing new growth vegetation. Because of overgrazing, deciduous woody plant species such as upland aspen and riparian cottonwood became seriously diminished. So because the keystone predators, the wolves, had been removed from the Yellowstone, Idaho ecosystem, the ecosystem changed. This change affected other species as well. Coyotes filled in the niche left by wolves, but couldn't control the large ungulate populations. Booming coyote numbers also had a negative effect on other species, particularly the red fox, pronghorn, and domestic sheep. When reintroduction efforts first began in 1995, Idaho citizens were afraid of the implications. Although the lack of wolves in the Yellowstone and Idaho region had brought about many negative circumstances, farmers and hunters were worried about the reintroduction of an apex predator. In 1995 and again in 1996, gray wolves were captured in Canada and relocated to Yellowstone National Park in central Idaho. Since reintroduction, wolves have dispersed throughout the region, returning to ecosystems that had long suffered in their absence. With wolf populations stabilizing since the early 2010s, Idaho lawmakers have called for hunting derbies, or mass huntings of wolves, often with bounties and prizes awarded to kills. This in turn has caused outrage among environmentalists calling it unethical. Both sides of the conflict have reasonable motives for the continuation or removal of wolves, but it is clear that Idaho's ecosystem is dependent on this predator. Like many other human-caused environmental problems, the removal and reintroduction of wolves to the Idaho wilderness has pros and cons on both sides. However, the introduction of bounties on wolves is wholly detrimental to the ecosystem, and that indiscriminate killing of wolves disrupts the social ecology of the packs and skews the population towards younger animals, who are less experienced hunters. Packs that lose important members are less able to hold a territory, likely to be displaced into marginal habitat. This sometimes leads to a higher likelihood that predators will kill livestock. In other words, of course, you can always voice your opinion at your local Fish and Wildlife office here in Idaho, and make sure to vote for offices and laws that will benefit all wildlife.